you were to visit the island of Sodor, you'll be right at home with the engines and their crews, and the beautiful land they live and flourish in. Despite the beautiful coastal regions with vast oceans that go on forever, to the dense wooded forests and mountain ranges that touch the sky, Sodor is a home of many beautiful sights, and also dangers lurking around. Donald and Douglas, the Scottish twins, were working around an old line of tracks that led to a long-forgotten mine. Buildings lay derelict and broken. Wagon frames of rust and wheels lay around with rotting wood where their trays once were. An overgrown brush and grass stalks towered over the sleepers and ballast. "What a boggin' dirty old place, Dougie!" Donald exclaimed, looking at the shambles of the mine. "You're too right, Donny," replied his twin. "This'll take a century to make it new." As workmen climbed out of the twins' coaches and grabbed various tools for trimming and demolition work, Donald couldn't help but notice one of the buildings occupying the mine's space was particularly crossed off with caution tape, and danger signs were visible all over it. Plywood was carefully bolted to where the windows used to be, and the doors were welded shut, permanently closed from any outside interference. "Wonder why they spent an excessive amount of time securing that one," Donald says. "Hey, you say something, Donnie?" "That building, Dougie. It's boarded up quite a bit, wouldn't you say?" Douglas took in the sight. "Och, you're right. Wonder what's in there." Probably nothing of concern, Dougie," said Donald. Throughout the day, workmen cut down long overgrown branches and grass, zigzagging in and out of some of the old buildings. They took some of the smaller structures apart and loaded the debris into the twins' trucks. The two rushed back and forth from the site to unload and load their trucks. As the sun started to dip down over the horizon, the men clambered into Douglas's coach. Donald decided to stay the night to keep watch on the yard with all their equipment there. "Have a good night, Donnie. See you in the morning," Douglas says, backing out of the yard and disappearing down the tracks. Donald's driver switches on his brake and then gets out of the cab to light a cigarette. He walks over and sits atop Donald's buffer beam. "Hey, Mac," Donald asks, "what do you think is in that building they've sealed off over there?" Donald's driver, a fellow named Mac, drags his cigarette and puffs out smoke rings. "I've no clue. Could be an old mine shaft that's dangerous. Could be where they stored dynamite. Or," his driver paused. Donald raised an eyebrow. "Or what?" "Or it could be a lurker's dwelling, sealed off from the surface." "Lurkers? What's a lurker?" Donald asks his driver. And his driver begins to tell a story. "My grandfather told me of them," his driver says. "They're a people of sorts, older than the Sudrians who once occupied the island. My grandfather was a miner in the late 1800s. Lurkers were a strange, humanoid-like people. They're completely white, like the snow in color. And they have human features, but they're off-looking." "What do you mean by off?" Donald asks. "Besides the pale white skin," his driver begins again, "solid reddish-brown eyes, almost no nose except for a few small nostrils. Their hands are lined with sharp long nails, and they have these backwards bent bird-like legs. And they only communicate to each other in clicking noise or rattling their throats. It sounds like The noise sent a shiver through Donald's frames. "My grandfather told me that deep down in the mines, if you got lost in one of the shafts, they'd come out to hunt you and tear the flesh from your bones in consumption." But of course, him being a young lad, like a lot of the other miners, chalked it up to fairy tales. Until his supervisor went missing at the end of one workday, and they found a patch of blood, and discarded bones the next day. "Are you pulling me wheels, driver?" Donald's driver looked around despondently. "I don't really know, Donald. My gramps never confirmed to me if it was real or he was pulling my wheels too," his driver chuckles. The whole story in general sent a shiver through Donald completely. Donald's driver stays a little bit longer with his engine, but soon leaves to find a place to stay for the night, leaving Donald all alone in the abandoned mining yard. Impatient with the long night ahead of him, he shuts his eyes to try and get some sleep. It's no more than 10 minutes to midnight when Donald is awakened by the sound of footsteps lingering in the woods around him. Donald opened a sleepy eye. Couldn't find a place to stay, driver," he asked, yawning, but there's no reply. Only more steps followed by the faint sounds of breathing. Donald's eyes shot awake now, looking all around his surroundings. "Who's there?" he asks, as his voice bounces off the walls of the area, but there's no reply. Only the footsteps continuing closer. Donald starts to panic a little bit and darts around like a madman when he sees some nearby bushes rustling, and he starts to shake. Thinking about the lurker story his driver told earlier, he shuts his eyes in fright, only to relax when a deer pops his head through the bushes and looks at Donald, wagging its tail. Donald sighs and smiles at the deer. "Oh, whew. Well. Hello, little fella." Donald smiles as he watches the deer graze on some grass growing between the sleepers in front of him. Before, the deer's head shoots up and looks toward the barricaded-up building Donald noticed from before. The deer scampers off back into the woods, noticeably spooked by something. Donald takes no notice of this until... Donald looks towards the building and notices the plywood boarding up the windows has been torn off, and the windows have been smashed to smithereens. "What the heck is going on?" he said. As soon as the noise started, it stopped, and everything fell quiet again, except for... Donald was afraid now. Very afraid. His whole boiler and frame shook before he noticed, within the black darkened space of the building's window, a pale white hand with long black claws escapes from the darkness, wrapping its fingers around the windowsill and pulling the frightening looking creature forwards into the light. "Great Scott, lurkers are real!" Donald shuts his eyes, still shaken, and only opens them when the figure disappears into the woods, hearing the bipedal footsteps disappear into the brush. Donald doesn't fall back asleep. Morning comes, and Donald did eventually fall asleep from sheer exhaustion. "Both of you gonna do what? Stay away from me! Stay away from me! Donnie?" It was only Douglas arriving with the workmen again. "Oh, Dougie, it was only you. Christ almighty, Donnie, you reacted as if you saw the devil himself." "Well, Dougie, I saw something last night." And Donald explained to Douglas what he saw. Douglas didn't exactly know what to say, but as Donald's driver Mac arrived, he told him too. Mac only laughed out loudly. "Oh, Donald, I was only kidding you last night. There's no such things as lurkers. I was merely teasing you," his driver guffaws. But Donald was insistent. They were all talking when suddenly a workman came running out of the derelict building, panic in his eyes. "What happened?" asked the supervisor. "There's blood in that building. Blood and bones scattered around. I think it's human." The group falls silent. Not wanting to take a chance, the supervisor takes the workman's word. "All right, everybody stop. Everyone stop working. Stop what you're doing. We're calling the constables to sort this out." Police arrived shortly after, taping off the building as a forensic team began to test the blood. "Well?" asked the detective to one of the forensic investigators. "Well, it's blood all right, but it's not human. It's from a chicken." "All right, chicken blood. What about the bones?" "Well, without a skull and considering they're fragmented, I'd have to take this back to the lab and sample some DNA. But it looks like a repeat pattern. Whoever did this might come back this evening." "Right then," the detective said. The detective speaks with a few officers nearby, and to Donald's driver. They decide they're going to stake out the scene this evening. Donald is anxious, but felt a little safer knowing there were constables in his work coach. As night fell, his driver was downing his fourth cup of coffee. The constables lazily swung their batons around as the hours ticked by. Driver?" Donald asks. "Yes?" "I know we're only pulling me wheels yesterday, but I saw what I saw. It was absolutely terrifying. Just about everything you described." "Right, Donald. I guess we'll see if this lurker comes back to this building." They didn't have to wait too long before they heard it. The noise, that deaf rattling of the throat noise. "There it is," Donald whispers, and the two officers and his driver turn to the bushes next to the building, seeing the creature crawl back into the building. But it looks a little different than the way Donald saw it last night. "Nobody make a sound," one officer whispers. The two officers unhook their pistols, and with flashlights in their hands sneak over to where the creature entered the building. The officers raise their pistols and are about to move when they see three people step out of the bushes. One has a camera, and the other two are holding binders. What the? They look like college kids. Donald was now confused, but the officers make their presence known and shine the flashlights on the three kids. "Hold it right there! This is private property and you're trespassing." "Aw, crap," one of them says. "Hey guys, are we gonna shoot this or what?" A voice comes from inside the building, and the pale white creature hops back out of the building. "Whoa! We give up. Just put the guns down, please. We're not doing anything bad," the creature says. "What are you kids doing here?" says an officer. The creature proceeds to take off its head, revealing a young freckle-faced boy underneath it. Donald and his driver are surprised. The officers escort the four over to where Donald is. "This is your monster," one of them says, unamused. "We were only shooting a project for school," one kid says. "Yeah, a horror movie," another one chimes. "What about the blood?" one cop asks. "Terry's father works in a slaughterhouse. That's where we got it." "And the bones?" "Well, they're real. We kind of stole them from the school lab. We were making a project based off of the urban legend of the Lurkers." By morning time, the four kids were subjected to a stern tongue lashing by the detective and officers on duty. Their parents were called to come get them. They were given a warning. As for Donald and Douglas, they shared a laugh about it with their drivers. The far-fetched idea of such a species existing was hilarious, and how Donald got scared when it was only some kid in a costume. As the kids were taken home and the police cleared out, Douglas left the yards with the workman's coach and equipment in tow. Donald waited for the last of the debris to be loaded into his trucks. He took one last look at the old mining yard, chuckling to himself as he starts to reverse down the line. But he listened closely and heard something. probably just a wind, he thought, and backed out of the line, disappearing down the track. Just a wind. Or was it?